Hi there, this video is an introduction video to the View Data Table. First, let's see the kinds of tables we have created. If you go to our GitHub repo and click the web link, you will be taken to the kitchen sink. Select the vData table item. This shows a table with a title, a search text box and some buttons. We have a few columns with edit and delete. In this example, some records are added. This is done with a timer. If you click loading, it shows a loading indicator in the table. This we later turn off. Next, we see some advanced tables. Select the vData table 1 item. As you can see here, some columns have chips and buttons, switches, the text in some is color-coded, etc. The next table has a lot going on. A couple of buttons both on the toolbar and columns. The switches here, for example, have been disabled so that a user does not change them. Note the notifications when clicking the action buttons. In the next table, we have some images, checkboxes, ratings and progress. These can be changed. The last table has some images and links. Clicking a link in this case activates your app to send email. What we will do next is to create a basic table, not as advanced as these. This will just to introduce you in terms of how to create a view data table in a simple way. Let's start before J to create a new project and create the basic data table, so that you are introduced in terms of how you will start. Create a new project and select the BANanoVuetifyAD3 EDS template. Type your project name and click OK. Let's create a new web page. We use a class module to do so. We add a standard class. We will call this view categories. We will show a list of categories in a data table. We will then copy some code from an existing page and update it. Let's use the code from the home page as it's smaller and simpler. Each page in our app should have a unique name, so this we will name categories. This name will be shown in the address bar when we navigate to that page. We will also create a layout design. Let's also name this categories. Next, let's remove the code that we don't need. We are now ready to create the layout that will have our data table and list our records. We open the designer to do that and drag and drop some components. In Banano Load Layout, we use the name categories. We need to save the layout with that name. We want our categories page to be accessible from the navigation drawer. Let's add the page to our app instance. We do this in PG index. As we created a class module, we need to define it. Next we go to the Add Pages sub, this we initialize the class module. What this does is initialize the page and load the layout and do whatever is needed by initialize. Initialize is mainly used to build the structure of our page. Now we need to add a link to our categories page to the drawer. We do this in the onCreated sub. It is important that you use the right URL for your page. The drawer list acts like a tree. You can add parent and child items when using the add item method. We have named our page categories. We use that name on the drawer item too. Now let's go back to our layout and create it. The first thing you need to add when creating a web page is a vContainer. Select a vContainer from the list of custom elements. This will act as a container for everything on the page. Let's resize it to fit the page area. This will help when adding more components to it. Inside the vContainer we need to create a grid of rows and columns. One can have any number of rows and any number of columns. The length of the column sizes in each row is fixed at 12. We add a row. We then need to add a column inside that row. Inside that column we will place our data table. We want the vContainer to fill the page width. Let's set its fluid to on. Let's continue and add a vcol inside the vrow. The next thing we need to determine is the length of the column for all the devices. This length should equal to a maximum of 12. For example, for small devices, we want the length of the column to be 12. For medium devices and the rest we make this 6. That is half of the screen. LG means large whilst XL means extra large. Next, we add the data table inside this column. You can create any number of columns inside a row, however, the length should be 12. If it's more, that particular column will be wrapped below. We add the data table. Remember, because of the column sizes we have specified, the table will be shown in 50% of the screen. We change the title to be categories, being what we want to show. The item key is the primary key we will define in our database table for categories. We want each record to be editable via an edit button. Let's add this. We also want each record to be deletable. Let's check this too. Next we need to indicate the field names to use. We will use the ID and the category fields. Each field will have a title. Let's specify these too. Now let's generate members for our layout, so that we can reference our components via code. We click Tools, Generate Members, select All and click Generate Members. We then close and save our layout. For each of the components, we need to execute bind state. This should be done after load layout. To demonstrate how we can add records to the data table, we will load records when the page is shown. When this page is shown, or rather created, we want to fire a subroutine call. We need to specify this. We will create and register a subroutine named add records to do this. In this sub, for now we will create some records to load. In the future these could be coming directly from a database. We will use the same fields we specified on the column fields property of the data table. Let's create some records. Each record can also have other map keys, but only the ones specified in the column fields property will be shown in the data table. Let's run our app. Because we indicated that on medium, large and extra large devices our columns should be 6, so the table takes half of the container width. Let's make all columns be 12 for all devices. We use the calls property for that. It will apply that width to all devices. In the next video, we code the CRUD functionality for these buttons. Our search and sorts are currently not working. We need to indicate which fields are sortable and filterable. Let's go back to the view table component to do that. We want both the ID and category fields to be sortable and filterable. Let's add them to columns filterable and columns sortable properties. For now, let's leave the rest of the properties. We run our app. This concludes our introduction to data tables. Thank you for your support.